Hey everybody, a quick note about our precision medicine training program. It's been a really popular course. We're constantly hiring health coaches and physicians, but we're only hiring them as we grow if they're trained in precision medicine. You don't get that in medical school or other places. And so we've developed this training program and we've completely revamped it recently. It's a lot more robust. So now there's still over 50 hours of live synchronous training. There's also all the asynchronous credit, over 50 hours of content. And as a physician, you get about 50 hours of AMA Category 1 CME credit, which is a nice benefit. For the health coaches going through the training program, it's now accredited by the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaching. So graduates are going to meet the requirement to sit for the board exam and become board certified health coaches. So there's a lot of benefits to that, not just the certification, but also when it comes to things like insurance reimbursement. So it's a really robust program. If you're a physician, a nurse practitioner, a PA, or someone that just wants to be a health coach, it's open to all of those categories. There's the 6-month program that's kind of the full program. And then we also have just a fundamentals of precision medicine course, which is completely on your own. It's online. It's all asynchronous. You still get the 50 hours of AMA Category 1, but it's self-paced. And you still have access to the online community, but not all the synchronous lectures as well. So if you're interested in checking that out, go to wildhealth.com/education. And we'd love to have you as part of our next class.
Hey everyone. Whether you're a medical practitioner or someone who's just generally interested in precision medicine, we're offering our podcast listeners an exclusive 20% off Wild Health's Precision Medicine Training Program. This 6-month immersive course includes over 50 hours of online curriculum, as well as live webinars and practical experiences. If you're already a health coach or medical professional, this program teaches you how to provide your patients with more personalized, genetics-based care. Better yet, Wild Health's Precision Medicine Training Program is accredited by the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaching and fully prepares you to sit for the NBHWC exam. To learn more about the program and apply today, head to wildhealth.com/education and be sure to mention the podcast for 20% off. Space is limited. Offer applies to June applicants only. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
It's going really well, Mike. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so excited about this. We've been trying to get this on the books and scheduled for a little bit, and it feels like Christmas morning's here, or my birthday, or whatever it is. I'm really excited to get a chance to chat with you. For our listeners, Matt's the CEO and founder of Raw Optics and the host of the Light Diet podcast. Raw offers high quality and attractive blue light blocking glasses that absorb harmful blue light frequencies. I've been fortunate enough to get a couple of samples in the mail, and I was telling you a little bit before we started recording, not only are they the highest quality glasses I've had, but they're the only ones that my 12 and 15-year-old kid think look really cool and try to steal from me. So congratulations. That says a lot about a product.
I love that. Thank you. Thank
And
you so much for that. It's truly an honor.
I should lead off with no conflict of interest. I'm not getting anything from Matt or from Raw to say that the product's great. I just actually really love it. So rather than giving the full bio on you, let's just make this interactive from the start. How did you get into this company? I know you moved straight in after high school, and I just got to hear the origin
Yeah.
story.
Yeah. I feel really lucky with how it all worked out. When I was a teenager, but even younger, I had a few different health issues, mainly just gut issues, chronic gas, bloating, and mainly just gas. And then I had over time, that was as young as age 4 or 5, I remember. Over time, I remember developing, I started developing really bad seasonal allergies as a young kid. And then over time in middle school, I got really bad migraines. I got really bad headaches on a regular basis. And this was like age, as young as my memory goes up till middle school, going into high school. And so I had accepted all that was genetic. But when I got into high school and I started getting really bad breakouts of acne, I actually started reading about what I could do, because all of a sudden like vanity kicked in and I was like, whoa. And I stumbled across the paleo diet, and I started reading about it and how it could heal a damaged gut and all this stuff. And it started talking about this idea of epigenetics and the idea that we could modify our genes with environmental inputs, diet, nutrition, but also light, which I didn't know about at that time. I just thought it was all about nutrition and supplementation at the time. So I became hyper obsessed from a place of like fear that if I didn't do this, I was going to get sick and die or just keep being sick. So I changed everything, went super strict paleo, went stricter, stricter, stricter. And I was on the diet cycle for a couple of years, like through my first 2 years of high school. And that was in some ways helpful to inform me about nutrition, but in other ways destructive because I was so obsessed that I thought I had to be perfect with my autoimmune paleo diet that I was doing, for example. Otherwise, I was going to have issues, health issues. Mm-hmm. And so finally, well, there's more to the story, but essentially the way I got to the company from there was that I came across a body of research, certain vloggers and researchers in this kind of alternative space talking about the role that light plays in health and how it affects our mitochondria, how it affects our circadian rhythms, and how that controls basically every function in our body, essentially, including most of health and wellness is founded on, based on healthy circadian rhythms and that kind of thing. So anyhow, I thought this is amazing. This is maybe the missing piece I was looking for. And surely it was a big part of what I was looking for. I don't think it was the be-all, end-all. There's more. But anyhow, after a couple more years of applying all these principles, I was going to graduate high school. I had read some books about startups. I thought like, well, gee, I'd rather not just go straight to university and be like controlled by, who's saying what I have, like somebody saying I have to do this and my dad's paying for college. Nothing against my father. I love my father, but like I wanted to be free, totally free. So I thought maybe I could start a business with all this information, and I did. And 6 years later, come September, it's going really well, and our products are amazing. Thank you for your compliment. And we have people all around the world, like top athletes, wearing them, as I was sharing with you. And so we're really fortunate that things have gone the way they have. But that's how we got here.
This is like, a health-focused American dream story. It's very cool to start a business out of high school from reading startup books and be successful 6 years later is such an achievement, and really I can't imagine that it was an easy road. There must have been a lot of hurdles along the way. There still
are. We're in the thick of it. I'm in the thick of it constantly, but I love it.
Yeah. Well, and starting a business that, 3 years into it is dealing with global supply chain issues and a pandemic and everything else. It's even more impressive. All right. Well, I think that's it. I'm not going to be nice to you anymore. I said, something nice about your product and something nice about you. So let's just make it really, I'm going to grill you now. No, I'm just kidding. I got to admit, my traditional Western medicine hat, which is getting smaller and smaller over the years, was like mitochondrial function. Like, for real, does that actually, does light actually play a role in mitochondrial function? And I did my research, and yet another thing I didn't really know about. I mean, we've got studies in cell metabolism that exposure to bright light, including natural sunlight in the morning, improves mitochondrial function and glucose metabolism in adults. There's all sorts of stuff about mitochondrial biogenesis in the skin and human skin cells when exposed to natural sunlight. So I'm a believer. I was a believer already in the role of natural light and regulating our circadian rhythms and how that influences both insulin and glucose metabolism and also sleep, which obviously there's a ton of downstream health effects from. So why don't you give me your perspective and share with listeners why is light so important and how does it affect our mental, physical, emotional health?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I love the way you put it about the hats, I have to say. And I came into this with a partially open-minded because I was kind of desperate, but also skeptical because I was raised like pretty atheist, and I just had this mindset of like, if it can't be proven, I don't believe it. Mm-hmm. But the science really did kind of blow my mind. So as far as why light is so important for health, I think the best way I could answer it is to say that without light, specifically sunlight, life wouldn't exist. And I consider health to be, if we ask what's health, well, I would say, you need life first and foremost for health to even exist. So like the concept of health is predicated on the existence of life. So without light energy to make us alive, the concept of health wouldn't even be possible necessarily. But then moving forward from there, when we have a living organism, I believe health is really the degree to which it functions as it's designed to. So, which is again predicated on, first of all, the existence of life, but then the question is, how does light actually improve our function, or how could it be that if we have the wrong light, it could actually be deleterious. And as you mentioned, there's quite a lot of research now out there, but even just if people consider it, I think from a theoretical perspective, our cells evolved under the power of full spectrum sunlight, similarly to plants, and our biology evolved quite a variety of functions that we're now discovering more and more are directly affected by light, as opposed to the indirect mechanism of consuming food, which is essentially stored sunlight energy in the electrons of the hydrogen of a sugar or a fat. And that's basically when we eat food, we reverse photosynthesis with internal combustion and break out that energy just like a fire. But anyway, so that light also affects us directly. Like, for example, the production of vitamin D synthesis is something very critical that's influenced by light. Our entire circadian rhythm and virtually all the rhythms of the production of different neurotransmitters and hormones all virtually follow circadian rhythms. Some are more active during the day, such as cortisol, dopamine, and so on. Others are more active at night, specifically melatonin, and it's a sort of there's a biphasic rhythm for both. Melatonin's more active at night, it peaks, and then it starts going down, and so on. So when we have natural light, when we're connected to the light we evolved in, our biology works more the way it's designed, similar to the concept of the paleo diet and eating ancestrally and eating natural foods that we evolved with. When we have artificial light, it basically affects our body in a way that is not quite aligned with what we evolved with. And for example, tangible examples of this is if we have artificial light at night, especially blue-enriched light, blue-enriched LED or fluorescent light, which is most light today, then we see there's tons of studies showing that this blue light causes melatonin suppression because it's effectively disrupting the circadian rhythm of melatonin production and our entire chronobiology, which is another term for the study of circadian rhythms. And so that's a really important thing. And I don't know if I imagine your audience is familiar with the importance of melatonin, but it's considered widely as the most important antioxidant, anti-aging, anti-cancer molecule because it's responsible for our cellular repair while we sleep. So if we destroy or even dampen that system by even a bit, it will ultimately lead to certain effects in our cellular health. And the last thing I would add to this is that, and this goes straight to the medical paradigm, there's a researcher named Dr. Douglas Wallace from the University of Pennsylvania and Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where that's currently where he's worked for the last several years. And he's been studying for decades. He's in his 70s now, but he started around the time when basically the structure of DNA was found by Watson and Crick. He basically went ahead and started studying mitochondrial genetics, whereas all of his peers were studying nuclear genetics to try to understand the etiology of the diseases. And the nuclear genetic research is where billions of dollars have been invested by the NIH and all sorts of nonprofits and foundations and NGOs and so on investing in this. And they found very little that makes a meaningful impact. But he found that actually the mitochondria in these disease states like diabetes, obesity, cancer, Alzheimer's, autoimmune diseases, whichever one you look at, in all these diseases, there's an issue with energy production, which makes sense when you think if we need energy to function, if we have less energy, we won't function properly, and we'll call that disease. And so his work, I would say, on mitochondrial genetics is arguably the foundation of epigenetic science, because epigenetics are mediated largely through the mitochondria, because something affects us negatively, usually, not always, but largely, the negative effect is that it diminishes energy production, whether it's toxic chemicals, artificial light, etc., toxic food. And then that leads, because the mitochondria speak with the nuclear genes, there's that, they call it mitonuclear coaptation, and basically there's crosstalk, and then the mitochondria are basically saying to the genes, hey, listen, we got energy, we can be in growth and repair, or hey, listen, we're in survival, we need to turn on the survival genes. Essentially, that's a shortened version of it. But I think it's fascinating. So light's so important for health, in conclusion, because it's one of the most important regulators of the mitochondrial circadian rhythm, mitochondrial energy production, and so on.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary. One of the things that I was fascinated to learn about only maybe 3 years ago was obviously from way back in med school, we knew about melatonin and regulating the circadian rhythm. Really interesting that just the patterns of the chronobiology patterns, like hormonally. The fact, I mean, yeah, I knew about cortisol spikes in the early morning, but the fact that we're so much more insulin resistant later in the night based on our circadian rhythm of metabolic hormones like insulin, we end up having real lifestyle impacts that trickle down from that. So eating more food earlier in the day when it's light, avoiding late night calories. There's genetic predispositions to increase your cancer risk with calories closer to bedtime when it's dark. We really did evolve for tens of thousands of years with it was light when the sun was up and it was dark when the sun was down. And okay, maybe we had some fire in the evenings at some point. And that was basically what we dealt with. And now it's light all the time. It's not natural light, but it's definitely light all the time. And we, I take care of patients regularly, and I would say upwards of 90% of folks have lower than optimal vitamin D levels. And it doesn't really matter. A lot of those folks live in sunny parts of the country. They're in California, Southern California or Florida or Arizona, and we just live inside. We are indoor livers right now. And it's, so in an ideal world, or maybe an ideal world from a circadian rhythm and chronobiology standpoint, we eliminate electricity and we all go back to living with candlelight and natural light. I think that's unlikely our society is going to swing that way. So talk to me about artificial light and what's, what you mentioned sort of blue light in the evenings, but is there a way to survive optimally with indoor living when we're faced with this constant bombardment of non-natural light?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I really do. You absolutely nailed it as well, that we are living so much indoors. There's government data on the United States population that we spend 92% of our time on average indoors, something like 86% in indoors and then 6% in a car. So it's quite a lot. So that being said, and yes, our indoor spaces are generally lit by artificial light sources, and even if they're lit with light coming through, for example, windows, many people don't know this. I didn't know this prior to studying this, but windows actually also filter out typically some of the more beneficial wavelengths of light, specifically in the near infrared range, which is the range that affects water metabolism in our cells and also has been shown to affect mitochondrial function very positively, red and near infrared light. And a lot of the modern windows do this because of energy efficiency concerns, to keep out extra infrared, which ends up heating the room. The wavelengths of infrared light are felt as heat, and they would heat up the room, and then you need more AC. So of course there's a higher demand for energy. So, but in doing so, we actually deprive our biology of some of these important wavelengths that we were always exposed to in nature for our metabolic activity. So anyway, as far as artificial light goes, what can we do? Well, actually, to circle back to the original question, which is how is artificial light affecting us? So yeah, artificial light at night, as we mentioned, disrupts the body's natural secretion of melatonin. This is one really important finding that's only being reaffirmed more and more and more by the science. And the way that this works, one of the main ways that this works, is that we have these 3 photoreceptors in our eyes. Many people are familiar with the rods and cones, which are responsible for our color image forming vision. Cones are more for high definition in high light environments during the day, and rods are, the vast majority of our photoreceptors are rods, and they're more responsible for low light vision, which actually makes a lot of sense evolutionarily, because when you're in low light is when you're most likely to be basically killed by prey, when you can't really see things. So it's really important that we have really good ability to see in darkness. Hence, there's something like 9 of our visual photoreceptors. It's something like 90+% are rods, and less than 10% are cones. Something approximately like that. Anyway, then it was discovered in the 90s that we have a third type of photoreceptor they call intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, and those contain, it's a kind of a mouthful, IPRGCs for short, but or retinal ganglion cells, but they contain the reason they were called intrinsically photosensitive because they were basically reacting to light, but they didn't know how. And then they discovered this pigment called melanopsin inside of these retinal cells, and they understood that, and they measured that this melanopsin is specifically sensitive to blue light wavelengths, with a peak sensitivity around 479 nanometers. And these cells are wired through the optic nerve to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is where the optic nerves meet. It's above the chiasm where the optic nerves meet in the brain. There's the hypothalamus and the suprachiasmatic nucleus within the hypothalamus, and this is identified by researchers as the master timekeeper of the body. And so anyway, what all of this means is that when we're exposed to blue light at night, it's at an unconscious level, it's disrupting our biology. And this is a big issue for health and wellness because we need to sleep and repair at night. And so there's a disruption there. Now, during the day, it's also an issue, but for a different reason. It's not as much melatonin suppression isn't a concern during the day because we want our melatonin to be suppressed because we don't want to fall asleep in everything we're doing. The main concern from artificial light during the day is actually retinal damage because, again, particularly from blue-enriched light sources, which are most modern LEDs that are used to light our screens and the devices we're looking at directly, constantly, and general lighting appliances as well. The blue light is not balanced by near-infrared light, and there's a good amount of evidence to suggest that blue light is more prone to cause the production of reactive oxygen species in cells, including retinal cells. And this is based on my research due to, at a deeper level, the way that blue light affects mitochondrial energy production compared to the way red light affects mitochondrial energy production. And so red light actually effectively supports mitochondria and allows them to generate more energy. And blue light essentially degrades mitochondria just because it's a very high energy, short wavelength light, very much like ultraviolet, which we know if we overdose on ultraviolet, we'll get a sunburn. But people don't realize that there's actually a similar but more slow and insidious effect from high exposure to blue light. So anyway, the point is that when we have this exposure to this blue light without the balance of near-infrared light, it causes basically faster degradation of these cells and the function of the cells. There's actually videos showing cells in vitro exposed to blue light and blue light with near infrared, and the cells with just the blue light, you can actually see them basically degrading much faster. So anyway, the near infrared functions in a protective way, and it makes sense considering that it's about 40% of sunlight. So all that's to say, when we're in an indoor environment, it's important to also protect our eyes, to protect our retinal health, which is why we make daylight blue light blocking glasses. People would ask, well, wait, I get it about night, but why would you block blue light during the day? Don't we need it? And it's because blue light from the sun, which is something even like, Dr. Andrew Huberman speaks about a lot from Stanford, and now that's the big thing, so low angle light in the morning to set the circadian rhythm. That light is not the same in its composition as modern artificial light sources. So that's the gist of artificial light. And what we can do about it is day protect with blue light protection eyewear, for example, which is something obviously I make. But there's more. That's not the only solution. At night, again, we have sunset lenses, as we call them, to protect from artificial light at night. But the other things people can do is get out more during the day, get some natural light. I generally recommend 5 to 10 minutes every 1 to 2 hours as a general, so people go out and take cigarette smoke breaks, better just go out and get a sun break. If people can go outside to smoke cigarettes, surely we can go outside to get some sun, right? And then the other thing is we're working on healthier forms of lighting. So lights that mimic the sun more. It's a work in progress. There are other products out there, nothing really exceptional currently. So the best thing people can do is use blue light protection and get outside more at the moment.
Yeah, I would add to that getting off your screens, which is increasingly challenging in today's world. But for example, a conversation like this, I want to have on video. I want to be able to see your face and exchange social information outside of just audio. But I've definitely moved recently to back to phone calls, which is like very old school. And my kids tease me about not being on video chat, but that's something that I think over the pandemic soared. Obviously, this idea of getting on Zoom, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, etc. And a lot of those meetings can happen over the phone. There's no need to be staring at a screen. You could literally be taking that call while going for a walk outside, and just as productive with without getting the actual just limiting exposure. I think is something that's often overlooked. So selfishly, you can see in my background probably that it's sunny, but I live in the Pacific Northwest, and we don't get a lot of sun from Halloween through July. Sometimes it just depends on the season. Wow. Sometimes we get a little bit luckier, like this year. So if you're living in a cold, dark place, any specific tips on improving your chronobiology? Just curious, asking for a friend, who's me.
Yeah, of course. So there's actually a really good book. There's quite a few books. I'll send you a document with some different references you might want to include in show notes, or different links and things after we speak, or after we're off. But essentially, one book called The Healing Sun was written by an architect named Richard Hobday, and he actually, as an architect, became fascinated by why light was such a focus of architecture for so long, and how it might affect our health. He went down that rabbit hole. And one of the studies I couldn't forget that he cited was in a group of 30 individuals with seasonal affective disorder in the winter, of course, where they didn't get enough light. They all went for an hour walk each day, just an hour walk in the morning hours, and 29 out of 30 had virtually complete elimination of their symptoms just with an hour walk. Now, maybe the study was skewed or something, but those results are almost too compelling to ignore, that there was something going on, unless they were just totally cooking the books and looking for a specific outcome, that walking outdoors is for some reason going to, I don't know, it doesn't sound like there could be a lot of conflict of interest there. It's not like a prescription drug, right? But anyway, I share that because I just thought, wow, because I grew up in Philadelphia, where it's also pretty dark and cold and whatnot from, November, October through April. And I just would start going outside more and going for walks, and I still do that. And sometimes by choice, because I'm kind of mobile, I travel quite a bit, but by choice, I'll stay in places that are cold and I enjoy it, but I'll make sure I get out and go for walks and spend lots of hours out in the light. I think that's the main thing. And then I also believe that if we look at Northern Europeans who have inhabited some of the coldest environments for thousands and thousands of years, and actually, and not just like Inuits, not like living wild effect essentially, but living in, I guess civilization, they've taken advantage of saunas, which is, fancy word for really, really high intensity infrared light therapy. So they, or I should say the other way around, but they, and in Russia they have banyas, they call them, but they're essentially the same, wood burning kind of huts almost, where you heat yourself up and sweat and detox at the same time. I highly recommend people take advantage of saunas, whether it's a infrared, near infrared, far infrared. Wood burning sauna is probably the best because it's the most natural in some respects, but it could be a sauna with the rocks, the Finnish sauna, whatever it is. I believe they're all beneficial, and I think that's something people can do that can tremendously benefit their health, and even a couple times per week in the winter, if that's something people can do. So I think getting out, using saunas, and then obviously, back to your really good point, limiting screen exposure, especially after sunset in the winter, is critical, because it's important to go inward, rest, rejuvenate, sleep during that time when there's not as much solar energy. All the trees basically hibernate in a way. So why should we be hyperactive in the winter? It's ultimately, I believe, much more taxing on our biology when we don't have that light to support our energy. Not just my belief, but what the evidence is saying of light and how it affects our health. And the last thing is, and you also alluded to this earlier, very much so with the science, but eating late, especially in the winter, is so disruptive, because we don't have, from my own studies and research, the reason largely that insulin follows this circadian rhythm is because the mitochondria are more prone or capable of burning that fuel earlier in the day when we have light, or just when we have light in general. So winter we just have less light overall. So those effects, I believe, would be compounded of eating late and big high calorie meals, especially high sugar, high glucose meals.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. My older son went out and played golf with his high school team earlier in the week, and I was dropping him off early in the morning for this tournament, and it was cloudy, and I said, you got to put some sunscreen on, and he was like, but it's cloudy, and I was like, you're 15, dude. You got to know this. You can still get a sunburn when it's cloudy. And of course, he partially listened and came back with a partial sunburn. Just to say that, I go out in the mornings here in Oregon during the winter, and there's a noticeable difference on the quality of my sleep architecture, my mood, a number of different factors just by getting out for 20 to 30 minutes in the morning. And the sun's not out, but you're still getting sunlight that's hitting your retinas. And I think just a key point for listeners, if you're going to go out and get some early morning light exposure, very likely to see results from doing that. Just make sure you go out, and that's not the time to have any sort of wavelength blocking glasses on. When you're out in natural sunlight, or even just the clouds without the sun, nothing on your eyes. Let the light hit your retina and get you, set you straight, get you on the right rhythm. Love the idea of taking light breaks instead of smoke breaks. Obviously, as a physician, far healthier for you to go outside and get some light exposure, maybe do some breath work as opposed to going outside and filling your lungs with cigarette smoke. Would love to hear just from a personal level, like, you've been deep in this for, better part of a decade. What's your daily routine as far as incorporating natural light and avoiding too much artificial light? And, clearly you're, wearing glasses when you're in front of a screen. You're wearing the sunset lenses if you got to be on your phone or doing something in the evening. But how do you incorporate natural light or any other tips to avoiding artificial light during the day?
Yeah. So as far as my daily routine, and first I'll say that when I'm on a screen, but if I'm outdoors where there's copious amounts of near infrared light offsetting the light of the screen, I mean, there's so much more sunlight when you're out compared to the amount of light coming off of a screen, I'll actually take off my glasses. Like if I'm out at a cafe working outdoors, no need for the glasses, because there's so much natural light coming in. I want to get that light. So that would be the only exception to that rule. Or if I'm sitting at my table or desk, but I have an open window right behind the computer, I'll actually take the lenses off and let that natural light come in, based on what I was sharing earlier about the balancing effects of near-infrared light on the more detrimental, let's say, effects of blue light. So as far as my routine goes, I've actually become very interested in Ayurvedic medicine because of the parallels between what I was studying from a Western perspective and the whole Ayurvedic system. I was just fascinated. I thought, gee, there seems to be an awful lot of parallels here. They say that you should eat your biggest meal in the middle of the day when the sun's the strongest, and our inner fire is essentially the strongest in the pitta energy, as they call it, in conjunction with the sunlight at that time. We shouldn't eat too late, especially heavy food, because it's harder to digest. It'll affect our sleep, and we won't be able to repair as well, and the next day will be more difficult. There's all these different factors that they talk about. The importance of having more of, if you're going to have sweet food in the day at some point, better in the morning when insulin is the most sensitive and not in the evening. And this just made so much sense to me. I thought, wow, this is probably what Western science is approaching, as it discovers more and more. They've known this for thousands of years. So maybe not everything was perfect, but anyhow. So what I generally do, especially when I'm in one place, I've been traveling. I'm in Europe at the moment, near Barcelona, in Catalonia, so Spain. So anyway, I've been moving and I'm out of my normal rhythm, and talk about hurting insulin and predisposing themselves genetically to issues. Spanish people eat dinner at 10 p.m. It's crazy. Literally, they'll start eating at 10:30. And they're at the edge of the Central European time zone, so it does actually not get dark until 10 p.m. and it's only April. So I imagine come June 21st, it'll be 11:30, it'll still be light. But anyway, what do I do? So I generally wake up when I'm in my ideal flow, like between 4 and 5 a.m. So pretty early, like even before the light comes up. And this is, I believe, the natural time for us to wake up as humans. And in general, not everyone. People have different chronotypes, as they say, but waking up before the sun is considered by Ayurvedic medicine to be very good, especially for men's health. For reasons I don't exactly fully understand yet. I'd like to get more knowledge on that. But so a friend of mine's an Ayurvedic doctor. I took it, and I just found that irrespective of what they say, I like being up even before the light comes up because I can be so focused in my meditation practice. And also, if then I still have some extra time, I get so much work done in those early morning hours when I'm not distracted. Similar to people who stay up really late to do that, but in a way that's more friendly to the circadian rhythm, to my circadian rhythm. So what I'll do then when the light comes up, or if I wake up and the light's already coming up, then I'll just go outside, or just if I'm in a hotel, I'll open all the windows and let the light come in and look at it for 5, 10, 15 minutes, depending on how I'm feeling, but somewhere in that range. Let the light hit my eyes, my skin. Sometimes I'll be totally naked and let it hit all of me, and it just activates the system, basically, as you said, gets everything right, essentially. And then I just try to spend as much time as I can outdoors throughout the day. So I go for a lot of walks. I take breaks when I work, sometimes not enough because I get so engaged, but I try to take a break. They say like 40 to 60 minutes. Like 40 minutes is the max where we can really focus. So I try every 40 to 60 minutes to take even a 5 to 10 minute breather, walk, fresh air, and it does have a huge impact when I do it. Just lots of time. For example, if I can work with the window open or if I can work out at a cafe, I typically will do that. And I used to do it maximally. Now I listen to my body more. Like sometimes if I'm outside at a cafe, but it's a white, gray sky and it's not really that inviting and I'd rather be cozy indoors, I'll go indoors. I used to be like fully always outside. And one of the things I've learned more recently is we don't need to overdo our sunlight exposure. One person I was following back several years ago was like more of the mindset of like more is better, but then I would constantly get burned, and ultimately that is predisposing us to skin cancer and all sorts of other issues, just aging and skin aging in general. So I've, since working with another expert in the field who's much more, let's say, moderate in his approach, I've come to believe from his direction. He's a leading photobiologist worldwide from Germany, and we work with him on product development. But anyway, one of the impacts he's had is for me to be a bit more moderate with my sun exposure and not thinking I need to be out all the time. So it's not like, he even said that generally speaking, this is a very general recommendation. It depends on time of year and cloud cover and all this, but 2 hours of unfiltered daylight, even if it's a cloudy day, is a good goal for people to shoot for. And that could even be just sitting next to an open window. So anyway, I try to accomplish that, and then when the evening comes around, when the evening comes around in respect to light, I will put on my blue blocking glasses, my raw optic sunset lenses, so these red lenses that I have right here. I'll put these on basically until I go to sleep, from the time the sun goes down until I go to sleep. That's essentially what I'll do, and since I'm traveling, I use a red headlight, like literally a trekking torch, a hiking torch that has a red function, and I use that at night everywhere I go, and it's kind of funny. More recently, I've started to experiment with different products for just warm or colored light, and we're actually developing products for, as I mentioned, healthier lighting, portable as well as for home, hoping to have some of these available in the end of this year, 2023, and into 2024. Those are the main things regarding light. And then the other thing worth touching on as well is regarding the food, because you made a really great point about insulin. Generally, what I aim to do is have a lighter breakfast, heavier lunch. So if I'm going to have heavy proteins, whether it's animal proteins or even plant proteins, I do love plant proteins. I'm not carnivore, but I'll have those in the middle of the day so my digestion can burn through them. And I notice a huge difference eating something a little heavier, whether it's chickpeas or some kind of fish or meat or eggs. I notice that I'm so much more clean digesting that in the middle of the day compared to if I eat something like that late. So I try to do that, and then as far as later in the day, I try generally, especially when I'm in my optimal routine in one place, I generally stop eating around 4 or 5 p.m. It can be a little different when I'm traveling. It might be 6, 7, especially in the summer. In the winter, I wouldn't, because for example, in Bali or Costa Rica, places I go often in the winter, it gets dark at 6:30. So like I have no desire to eat anyway after really that time. So I try to eat by 4 or 5 at the latest, and then I'm asleep by 8, 8:30, 9 in those places. Here in Spain, it's light till basically 10. So I'm not getting to sleep till generally 9:30, 10. But that's really like a day in the life. I try to keep it pretty simple. And when I'm using my devices, of course, I use my glasses. But I'll also give people the pro tip, as we could say. There's software you may have, Mike, called Iris, IRIS. It's made by a really great programmer from Bulgaria. Really great guy. I've spoken with him before. But there's another one called F.Lux. But these are both blue light blocking softwares people can use. And I use that to cut the blue light from my screen. So sometimes I won't use my glasses when I'm on my computer because I'll block all that blue light out with the software. The main time the glasses become absolutely critical is when I go somewhere where there's overhead lights that I cannot change with the software. That's when they're 100% on. I was recently giving a talk to a friend of mine who has clinics in Spain, functional medicine clinics, kind of similar to Wild Health, very focused. They do tests. They don't just give broad sweeping recommendations to people. And anyway, I gave a talk to some of his team, also over Zoom and in person, because they have a few locations. And the lighting was terrible. I was telling him, man, we have to change the lights. They're selling our glasses now, but I'm like, dude, we got to change the lights too. This is an issue. So I had those on the whole time, and it really relieved me from these old school fluorescents, which you barely even see anymore. Those were like really bad, even worse than the LEDs. So anyway, that's what I do. That's a day in the life. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love finding out what people's routines look like and how folks who are really deep into the science and the philosophy end up walking the walk, besides just talking the talk. So I love that. If people want to find out more about what you guys do, obviously rawoptics.com, RAOPTICS.com. You have the Light Diet podcast. We'll put stuff in the show notes. If you want to send me a promo code for listeners, we can put that in the show notes as well. And then we can get some references in there too. Last thing that I want to make sure we cover, and I know we're coming up on a hard stop for me in a little bit, is can you give me a 2 or 3 minute rundown of what the technology is behind your lenses? So what kind of went into that, and what, if anything, makes you guys stand out from the $9 ugly crack in half blue light blocking glasses that you can buy on Amazon?
Yeah, absolutely. So that you did say it well. So just to give the brief summary here, the first issue with the majority of the blue blocking lenses available is that they're clear. And the clear, by definition, means that the wavelengths coming through the lens on the one side pass through to the other side. They usually will utilize a flashy anti-reflective coating called a UV 420 coating in the industry, meaning it blocks UV light and up to 420 nanometers. Blue goes from around 400 to 500 nanometers. The blue light that affects our circadian rhythm is centered around 480 nanometers, 479, although it goes down 20 to 30 nanometers and up 20 to 30 nanometers. And it doesn't just like after a certain point eliminate circadian effects. Even when you go to red wavelengths, you can still disrupt your circadian rhythm with a high enough intensity. But anyway, we focused on that, which has the highest effect. But anyway, the blue light coming off of screens is centered around 455 nanometers, but again, plus or minus approximately 20, 30 nanometers, depending on the LED source. Now, so if we're blocking, that means UV 420 up to 420, and then we have the spectrum of blue light coming off screens around 455, but going down to 430 and up to 480, which is where our biology is the most sensitive, especially at night. Then we're basically not blocking the actual problem wavelengths. And so they maintain that clear appearance by not blocking any of the wavelengths that are coming from screens. So they appear clear because everything's passing through. So it's a huge gimmick that's going on, and that's like 98% of the blue blocking glasses sold today are from these major mainstream optical companies like Zeiss and Warby Parker and all the others that have added a blue light coating option to their existing business, and people take it, even sometimes with no prescription. They just go buy the blue light glasses. But that's the big issue. So we worked on developing lenses with pigments, so we worked with experts in the space, specifically in pigment technology and utilizing different combinations of pigments for different applications, including skin creams and all sorts of other stuff, and specifically looking at lenses and how can we develop a formulation of pigments that blocks the right wavelengths. It's actually quite simple, and the thing that's shocking is that very few people do it properly. So in some respects it's simple, in some respects there's proprietary things we do, certain pigments we use and the mixtures we use that are proprietary, but the concept itself is relatively simple. So there's a lot of gimmicks out there, and so what we focus on is doing it right and then measuring it. So not only making the lenses, but actually testing them and measuring them to make sure they're eliminating these wavelengths of blue light. So we use different tests to test how much, different measuring methods that we developed specifically with our scientific advisors to test just purely blue light extinction from our lenses, how much blue light's being blocked and how can we increase that, especially at night. And then during the day, the daytime lenses are a totally different game, because it's not all about maxing out blue light extinction. It's actually how can we have a healthy amount of blue light protection, but also color rendering, because people don't want to wear a totally color distorting lens all day. So there's a lot more balancing going on there. So anyway, we're looking at all these factors, and then we're looking at also at the end of the day, when you have blue light protection, you have the optimal color rendering. What about the hue? Because we can also tweak the hue of the lens, the subjective experience of the color, and how is that affecting your mood? What shade of yellow or what shade of red orange for our sunset lenses? And we're working on, certain hues can be more energizing, certain hues can be more relaxing. So we're also looking at things like that. So there's a lot that goes into it. And then the last thing is the frames, and you mentioned the style, your kids like them. We also use, in our frames, they're made of Italian acetate and German metal, so the highest quality materials, raw materials we can get to make high quality frames. We quality check everything multiple times, and we also offer a really, I'd say, strong return policy. Basically, if you don't love them and you don't feel the effects, return them and we'll give you your money back. Like, pretty much no questions asked. So we're so confident they work. The last thing I'll say is that we did a partnership last year with Aura, the maker of the Aura ring, where people would refer a friend to purchase a ring and they'd get a free pair of our sunset lenses as a gift. And I didn't even realize, because they were coming to our website to claim the free gift, I didn't really consider that they were also going to be getting an email to leave us a review. And we started getting all these reviews from people whose sleep scores improved measurably, and they didn't believe it. They were super skeptical in the beginning. They thought this was just a gimmick, but they'll just take it anyway as a gift. And that was pretty impressive and really encouraging. That we knew that from a few cases of friends and myself and people who I would speak to, but to have so much feedback that happens so consistently, it's really basically proving that science works. So when you do good science and the science shows that blue light affects melatonin and melatonin affects our sleep quality, and if we block the harmful blue light that disrupts that, well, we can improve melatonin, we can improve deep sleep and sleep quality overall, and that's really reaffirming. So thanks, Mike, for asking. That is the answer, that's as brief as I can put it.
That's amazing. Well, like, just to go back to patting you on the back. So impressive what you guys have done. Huge fan of the company, and thanks for coming and sharing your knowledge with us and your daily routine. We'll put info in the show notes for folks, and I'm jealous of having to figure out the sunset cycles in Spain, Costa Rica, and Bali. Maybe someday that'll be my work environment, and I'll figure out when I need to go to bed. But thanks so much for coming on, man. It was a blast.
Thank you so much, Mike. Likewise, I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening to the Wild Health Podcast. If you're a Wild Health patient, you might not know, but you have access to our referral program. This gets your friends and family 25% off Wild Health services. Just head to Clarity, and in the top right corner, you'll see Refer a Friend. Click there, and you'll be brought to a page with your referral code. Happy sharing.